My name is Callie, and I'm 39 years old. A few years ago, I was a nurse working in the emergency department at a local hospital. It was demanding, exhausting work, but it gave my life purpose until an accident on the job forced me to retire earlier than I ever planned. A patient I was helping slipped on a wet floor and pulled me down with them. I landed hard, fracturing my spine and damaging nerves in my lower back. Since then, my days have been slower, quieter, and more dependent on the monthly pension that keeps me afloat. When my husband, Ethan, passed away from a sudden heart attack 5 years ago, my world collapsed. We never had children, so the house felt unbearably empty after he was gone. The only thing that pulled me through those dark years was the support of his younger brother, Trevor, and his wife, Melinda. They stepped into my life in a way that felt like grace. Melinda would drop by with groceries, help me with doctor appointments, and call every few days just to check in. She once told me, "You're the sister I never had." And I believed her. I used to think of Melinda as the kind of woman who held families together. She was charismatic, organized, and had this way of making you feel like everything was under control when she was around. Trevor, on the other hand, was quieter, gentle, easygoing, and maybe a bit too trusting. The two of them seemed like the perfect couple. If someone had told me then that they'd nearly destroy my life, I would have laughed in disbelief. It all began on a Thursday morning when I got a call from the pension office. A woman on the line told me there had been an update to my pension program and that new documentation was required to continue my payments. She said it was just a verification process, nothing urgent. But she needed a few forms filled out and resubmitted. Normally, I'd have gone in person, but my back pain had been unbearable that week. When I mentioned it to Melinda, she immediately offered to handle it for me. "You've done enough paperwork in your life," she said, her tone light but persuasive. "Let Trevor and me take care of this. It's just bureaucracy." I hesitated. I've always been cautious about finances, especially since Ethan's death, but Melinda's offer sounded harmless. She insisted they'd go to the pension office together and deliver the forms directly. "You just sign the authorization, and we'll handle the rest," she said. "You don't need to lift a finger." Looking back, I wish I'd trusted that uneasy feeling that crept up my spine. But at the time, I told myself I was being paranoid. They were family. Trevor even added, "Don't worry, Cal. You know we'd never let anything bad happen to you." So I signed the authorization and gave them the documents. Melinda asked for a copy of my pension account details, just to make sure the deposit info matches. She smiled reassuringly, as if she could sense my doubt. I remember her exact words, "We'll handle your pension. You can relax for once." It was strange how someone could sound so sincere while setting up your downfall. They left early that morning, and I went about my day, trying not to overthink. I watched an old movie, made tea, and told myself that by next week, everything would be sorted. But there was something different about the house after they left. The silence felt heavier, almost watchful. That night, I sat by the window and thought about Ethan. He'd always said money made people reveal their true selves. I brushed off the thought, telling myself that kind of suspicion was cruel. Melinda had stood by me when no one else did. Why would she ever hurt me? The next few days went by without any word from her. No calls, no texts. I assumed she was just busy, maybe caught up at work. But a small voice inside me whispered that something wasn't right. I ignored it, choosing comfort over caution. On the third morning I woke up to find my pension payment hadn't arrived. I stared at my bank app in confusion, refreshing it over and over, as though it might suddenly fix itself. My monthly deposit always came like clockwork until now. I tried calling the pension office, but the line was busy. I sent Melinda a message, "Hey, just checking if everything went okay with the forms." No reply. I waited another hour before calling Trevor. He didn't answer either. That's when my stomach began to twist in dread. I had trusted them with everything, my documents, my bank details, my signature. I told myself I was just overreacting, but deep down, I knew something was wrong. I made myself a cup of coffee and sat in silence, the minutes dragging on. The house felt colder than usual, and my mind wouldn't stop racing through possibilities. Maybe they lost the forms. Maybe the office made an error. Maybe it wasn't an accident. I didn't know it then, but by the time the sun set that evening, the people I considered my closest family would no longer be the same in my eyes. When they left with my documents that morning, I had no idea what kind of storm was about to hit my life. 3 days passed and I didn't hear a single word from Melinda or Trevor. At first, I told myself they were just busy. Trevor worked long shifts at the auto shop, and Melinda had a part-time job at the local insurance office. It wasn't unusual for them to go quiet for a day or two, but this silence felt different. It wasn't casual, it was deliberate. Every time I checked my phone, I half expected to see a text saying, "Everything's fine, Callie. All sorted." But nothing came. By the third morning, unease began to gnaw at me. I'd been expecting my pension payment 2 days earlier, but it still hadn't arrived. That pension wasn't just a paycheck, it was my lifeline. Without it, I couldn't pay my mortgage, my medication, or even groceries for the month. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at my laptop screen, refreshing my bank account again and again. The same disappointing numbers blinked back at me. My heart started to race. Maybe there'd been an administrative delay? I checked the pension website, everything looked normal. Then, on impulse, I called the pension office directly. After a few minutes on hold, a polite but distant-sounding woman answered. "Can you please confirm your account and name?" she asked. I did, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on the line too long to be routine. Then she said, "Oh, Miss Stanton, I see the account was updated recently. Is this about the beneficiary change?" My stomach dropped. "What change?" I asked. Another pause. I could hear the clacking of her keyboard. "It appears someone authorized a transfer of management and updated your deposit account. The listed names are Trevor Stanton and Melinda Stanton. Is that correct?" For a moment, I couldn't breathe. "No," I managed to say, my throat tightening. "That's not correct. That's my late husband's brother and his wife. I never authorized any changes." The representative's tone shifted immediately. "If that's the case, you'll need to file a fraud dispute. It looks like the transfer was completed in person at the local branch last week." I gripped the edge of the table, my pulse pounding in my ears. "In person? With my authorization?" "Yes, with signatures on file," she replied. "We also verified identification matching yours." It was like hearing my world crumble in slow motion. Someone had impersonated me. Someone had walked into that office, presented my information, and taken control of my pension, and I knew exactly who that someone was. I ended the call, trembling so hard I could barely hold my phone. A dozen thoughts collided in my mind: anger, fear, disbelief. I felt like a fool. I had trusted Melinda completely, given her everything she needed to destroy me. My next move was instinctive. I picked up my car keys. Despite my back pain, I wasn't going to sit around and wait. I needed answers. I drove to their house across town, the steering wheel slick with sweat from my palms. Every mile made my pulse race faster. Their house looked quiet when I pulled into the driveway. The front curtains drawn. Trevor's truck was parked outside, but Melinda's car was missing. I knocked once, no answer. Then again. Harder this time. Finally, the door opened, and Trevor stood there, his face pale and strained. His eyes darted nervously behind me, as if expecting someone else. "Callie," he said softly, like he wasn't sure whether to hug me or run from me. "Where's Melinda?" I demanded. "I've been trying to call her for days." He rubbed the back of his neck, avoiding my gaze. "She's out. What's going on?" "What's going on?" I repeated, my voice cracking. "Is that my pension account was changed. My money's gone, Trevor. And the office said you two updated the information." He blinked rapidly, his jaw tightening. "Wait, what?" Melinda said. He stopped himself, his lips pressing into a thin line. "Melinda said what?" I pressed. "That you asked her to handle it," he muttered. "That you wanted the funds transferred temporarily while the paperwork was being sorted. She said you were stressed and didn't want to deal with it. My head spun. Do you actually believe that? Do you really think I'd hand over my entire pension like that? He looked down at the floor, his voice barely audible. I don't know what to believe anymore. I could see the confusion and guilt written all over him. He wasn't lying. He was scared, and from the look in his eyes, Trevor, I said slowly, you have to tell me the truth. Did Melinda take my money? He swallowed hard, glancing toward the hallway. I don't know what she's done, Callie, but if I were you, I'd be careful. She's been acting strange lately, secretive. I asked her about some big deposits I saw, and she told me to stay out of it. My pulse quickened. Deposits? From where? He shook his head. I don't know. I didn't want to push her. She's been on edge for weeks. I stared at him, torn between sympathy and rage. Trevor looked like a man caught in his wife's web, unsure how deep it went or whether he could ever escape it. I'm going to the bank, I said finally. If she transferred my pension, there'll be a paper trail. He opened his mouth to say something, then stopped. Callie, don't make her angry. You don't know what she's capable of. That warning chilled me to the bone. I turned and walked toward the door, my mind spinning with questions I didn't have answers to. How long had Melinda been planning this? How could someone smile at you one day and steal everything from you the next? I paused by their kitchen on my way out. The countertop was cluttered with mail, empty coffee mugs, and a few unopened envelopes. And then I saw an official-looking bank envelope with my name faintly visible through the window. My hand trembled as I reached for it. I was about to confront them, but what I found next made confrontation the least of my worries. I drove straight to their house, desperate for answers. I didn't even think about calling the police first, I just needed to see proof with my own eyes. The drive across town felt endless. My pulse thudded in my ears the whole way, the same sentence looping in my mind. They wouldn't do this to me. They wouldn't. But the envelope I'd glimpsed on their kitchen counter wouldn't leave my head. The faint outline of my name behind the plastic window haunted me the entire trip. When I pulled up again, Trevor was still outside. He was pacing the driveway, his phone pressed to his ear, but when he saw me get out of the car, his face turned pale. He quickly ended his call and looked, like he wanted to run back inside. Trevor? I said firmly. We're not doing this dance anymore. Where's Melinda? She's gone, he muttered. Left right after you did. Said she needed to clear her head. Clear her head? I snapped. She stole my pension, Trevor. I just spoke to the office. They confirmed every transfer was made to an account under your names. He looked genuinely stricken, his mouth opening and closing as if trying to form an explanation. Callie, I swear I didn't know. She told me it was all approved. She said you gave her written permission to move the funds for investment purposes. My hands clenched at my sides. Investment purposes? Trevor, that's my retirement money. I can't even work anymore. And you're telling me she convinced you I wanted her to touch it? He winced, his shoulders sagging under invisible weight. I didn't see the documents until yesterday. I asked her about them, but she said everything was handled and that you'd thank her later. I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Handled what exactly? He rubbed the bridge of his nose, avoiding my eyes. She said she was helping you get a higher payout by moving your pension into a short-term holding account. Something about higher returns. I didn't question her. Didn't question her? I echoed, my voice breaking. Trevor, she took everything. My account's empty. I can't even pay my bills. He froze, the color draining from his face. What do you mean empty? I pushed past him into the house. He didn't try to stop me this time. The place was quiet, eerily so. The faint scent of Melinda's perfume lingered in the air, something expensive and sharp. The envelope I'd seen earlier still sat on the counter. I grabbed it and tore it open. Inside was a printed bank statement. At the top, my name had been scratched out with blue ink and rewritten by hand. Melinda Stanton. I felt bile rise in my throat as I scanned the transactions. Over the past week, nearly $60,000 had been withdrawn from my pension and deposited into a new joint savings account under Melinda's name. Trevor, I whispered, my voice trembling. Look at this. He stepped closer, peered at the paper, and his jaw dropped. She told me this was her savings. I never saw the name. I turned the page over. There were notes scribbled on the back, Melinda's handwriting. Phrases like, close out account soon, and get Callie to sign secondary doc if needed. Every word felt like a stab in the chest. How long has she been doing this? I asked, though the question was more to myself. Trevor's voice cracked. I don't know. I swear I don't. She started being secretive months ago. Changed her passwords. Stopped letting me see the bills. I thought she was planning something nice, like a surprise vacation. He laughed bitterly. Guess I was the surprise. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. She used both of us, I said quietly. She played me with kindness and played you with loyalty. He sank onto a chair, burying his face in his hands. I should have known. I just didn't want to believe it. I folded the statement and slipped it into my purse. I'm going to the police. She's committed fraud, and I'm not letting her get away with it. Trevor lifted his head, panic flickering in his eyes. Callie, wait, don't please. You don't understand. Don't understand what? He swallowed hard. She's dangerous when she feels cornered. I've seen her do things, terrible things, when she's scared. If she finds out you went to the police, she'll come after you. She's not the woman you think she is. A cold shiver ran down my spine. What do you mean, terrible things? He hesitated, glancing toward the window like he expected her to appear, any second. Just, be careful, okay? Let me talk to her first. I'll get her to fix this. Fix this? I snapped. She stole my life savings, Trevor. You think she's just going to hand it back because you ask nicely? He looked broken, caught between guilt and fear. I could tell he wanted to help but didn't know how. Please, he whispered. Give me one night. I'll find her. I'll talk to her. If she doesn't come clean, I'll go to the police with you tomorrow. I promise. I studied his face for a long moment. There was desperation there, but also sincerity. Against my better judgment, I nodded. You have one day, Trevor. Tomorrow, if this isn't fixed, I'm calling the police myself. He nodded weakly, and I turned to leave. As I reached the door, something on the floor caught my eye, a half-crumpled receipt from a local bank. My account number was written on it, along with a note in Melinda's handwriting. Transfer complete, close out Monday. My breath caught in my throat. Monday was 2 days from now. She wasn't done yet. But just as I turned to leave, I saw a bank envelope on their kitchen counter, and what was inside made my stomach drop. Inside that envelope was a printed statement with my name crossed out and Melinda's handwritten beside it. I stood there, frozen, staring at the document as if it might suddenly change before my eyes. My hands trembled so violently I almost dropped it. My full name, Callie Stanton, was printed neatly at the top, but Melinda had drawn a thick blue line through it and written her own name above mine, in her looping, confident handwriting. It was the kind of handwriting you'd expect on a birthday card, not a crime. The statement detailed a series of transfers, systematic, methodical, cold. Over the course of 6 days, $59,843 had been moved from my pension account into another under the name Melinda Stanton. There were no withdrawals, no large purchases, just clean, deliberate transfers. Every transaction was time-stamped, and the last one had been completed that morning. My knees went weak. I had worked my entire life for that money, long nights at the hospital. Missed holidays. Double shifts to cover bills after Ethan died, and now, it was gone. Just gone. I looked up at Trevor, who was still sitting at the kitchen table, pale and defeated. Did you know about this? I asked quietly, my voice shaking. He shook his head. No. I swear I didn't. She forged my name, Trevor. She forged my signature. She walked into that bank pretending to be me. This isn't just a mistake, this is theft. He swallowed hard, looking as if he might be sick. Callie. I'm so sorry. I didn't think she'd ever... Didn't think she'd what? I cut him off sharply. She's been lying for weeks, and you've been right next to her. You didn't notice her hiding statements, sneaking out early, moving thousands of dollars? I thought she was helping you, he said, his voice cracking. She told me you were depressed about the pension not earning enough and wanted her to invest it in something better. I swear, Callie, I believed her. I pressed the heels of my hands to my eyes, trying to stop the room from spinning. I wanted to scream, but my throat felt like it was closing up. When I finally spoke again, my voice was low, almost a whisper. You need to tell me everything, Trevor. Every single thing she said about this. He took a shaky breath and nodded. She came to me about 2 weeks ago, said you'd asked her to manage some of your finances because you didn't trust the pension office anymore. She showed me texts from you saying you wanted her to take over the transfers. They looked real, Callie. The profile picture was yours. The number was only 1 digit off from your real one. I didn't question it. The realization hit me like a slap. She made a fake account. She was pretending to be me. He nodded miserably. She said you'd given her permission to open a holding account so she could increase your returns with a family-managed fund. She told me it was temporary. I couldn't believe how meticulously she'd planned it. She had forged my signature, created fake messages, and even designed an entire narrative to make Trevor believe it. The level of manipulation was terrifying. She's been lying to both of us, I said slowly. You realize that, right? She used your name so you'd be implicated too. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. Oh God, if she gets caught, she will get caught, I said firmly. And if you want to protect yourself, you'll help me expose her. He hesitated, torn between fear and guilt. What do you want me to do? I need proof, I said. Bank records, emails, anything that shows what she's been doing. You said she's been acting secretive. Where does she keep her files? He pointed toward the small home office down the hall. She keeps everything in there. The password on her laptop is our anniversary date. I never thought she'd lock me out of our own life. I went to the office and turned on the computer. My hands were still shaking as I typed in the date. The desktop loaded instantly, and I was greeted by a folder labeled Financial Adjustments. Inside, I found scanned documents, receipts, and what looked like a forged version of my pension authorization form. The signature at the bottom was supposed to be mine, but it wasn't. It was a copy so close that anyone else might have believed it, but I knew my own handwriting. The C in Callie had a different curve, and the spacing between the letters was wrong. I printed every document I could find. Trevor stood beside me the whole time, silent and pale, as if he were watching his entire world collapse. When I was done, I gathered everything into a folder. This is enough to start an investigation, I said. I'm taking this to the police tomorrow. Trevor nodded weakly. I'll come with you. I can't believe she did this. I looked at him for a long moment. Trevor, I think you do believe it. You just didn't want to. He didn't argue. He just stared at the floor, his eyes glassy with tears. When I got home that night, I spread the papers across my kitchen table, trying to piece everything together. It was all there, the false authorizations, the transfers, the forged IDs. Melinda had planned this carefully, maybe for months. I should have felt relief at finding proof, but all I felt was exhaustion. I couldn't stop thinking about the nights she'd sat in my living room, laughing with me, pretending to care. How she'd hugged me after Ethan's funeral and told me she'd always look out for me. Every moment now felt like a lie. Still, part of me wondered why. Was it greed? Desperation? Or had this been her plan from the start? I didn't know it yet, but the answer was darker than anything I could have imagined. Because Melinda wasn't finished, not by a long shot. Neither of us knew that by the next morning, Melinda's lies would spiral completely out of control. Melinda came home earlier than expected, and she wasn't happy to see me there. It was late the next morning. Trevor had called, saying he couldn't find Melinda anywhere and that she wasn't answering her phone. He sounded genuinely afraid. I told him to meet me at the house again so we could take everything to the police together. I packed the folder of printed statements, copies of the forged forms, and the fake text screenshots I'd emailed myself from her laptop. When I arrived, Trevor was sitting on the porch steps, his face buried in his hands. He looked like he hadn't slept. She's going to lose it, he muttered when I walked up. She'll know it was me who showed you. She should have thought about that before she stole from me, I said coldly. We're doing the right thing. Before either of us could say another word, Melinda's car pulled into the driveway. The tires screeched as she slammed it into park. I could feel the tension in the air like static before a lightning strike. She stepped out, sunglasses covering her eyes, her posture confident and sharp, like she'd been rehearsing for a confrontation. Well, she said, setting her purse down on the hood. What's this, a family meeting? Trevor stood immediately, his hands trembling. Mel, we need to talk. Oh. I bet you do. She cut him off, her voice dripping with sarcasm. Then she looked at me. And you? I see you couldn't keep your nose out of business that doesn't concern you. I met her gaze, steady. It's my pension, Melinda. My life savings. I'd say that concerns me more than anyone. Her lips curled into a smile, but there was no warmth in it. You're being dramatic. I was helping you, Callie. You said yourself you were tired of dealing with paperwork. I made things easier. By forging my signature and taking my money, I shot back. Her smile dropped. Watch your tone. Trevor stepped between us, his voice shaky. Mel, she knows everything. She's seen the bank statements, the transfers, everything. For a second, she just stared at him. Her expression blank. Then her eyes narrowed. You showed her? You went through my things? You lied to me, he said softly. To both of us. Melinda laughed, a hollow, cruel sound that made my skin crawl. You two are unbelievable. I bend over backward for this family, and this is the thanks I get? Accusations? Melinda, I said, forcing calm into my voice. It's over. I've already contacted a lawyer. You can make this easier by returning the money and admitting what you did. She turned to me with an icy stare. You really think anyone's going to believe you? You signed the forms. The pension office has your name, your signature, your authorization. You forged all of it, I said. I have proof. For the first time, I saw a flicker of something crack through her composure panic, quickly masked by anger. You're making a mistake, she said through clenched teeth. You think you can ruin me, but you have no idea who you're dealing with. Trevor's voice rose. Melinda, stop. Just tell her the truth before this gets worse. She turned on him, her face twisting in fury. Don't you dare take her side, she shouted. You think you're innocent? You signed half those forms yourself. Trevor's voice faltered. You told me they were for tax purposes. And you believed me, she snapped, laughing bitterly. You always do. You're so easy to control, it's almost sad. I could see Trevor shrinking into himself, guilt washing over him. I stepped forward. That's enough, Melinda. You've manipulated him long enough. I'm taking this to the police today. Her head snapped toward me, her expression turning deadly calm. If you do that, Callie, I'll make sure you regret it. I didn't move. Is that a threat? Her smile returned, smaller this time, colder. Just a fact. You have no idea what I can do when I'm cornered. The air in the room felt suffocating. I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. Melinda grabbed her purse, turned to Trevor, and said in a voice that was almost eerily calm, You'll wish you'd never crossed me. Then she looked at me and added, And you'll wish you never met me. She walked out the door without another word, the slam echoing through the entire house. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, like the world had paused just to listen. Trevor slumped onto the couch, burying his face in his hands again. You don't understand, he said softly. She's not just angry, she's vengeful. When she says she'll make someone regret it, she means it. I stood there, gripping the folder tightly. My mind raced with everything she'd said, the threats, the lies, the audacity. I knew then that going to the police wasn't optional anymore, it was survival. Then we'll be ready for her, I said. Whatever she's planning, it ends now. Trevor looked up at me, his eyes red and hollow. You don't know her like I do, Callie, he whispered. She doesn't lose. Ever. I didn't answer. Because deep down, I was starting to believe him. Then she stormed out of the house, slamming the door behind her, leaving behind a trail of fear and a plan to destroy her own family. The next week, things took a terrifying turn. At first I thought the threats were just hot air. Melinda's last words replayed like a bad recording, and I tried to steel myself against them. Then the caller ID showed up, unknown. The voice on the other end was distorted, male, and soft. "Drop it, Callie," he said. "You don't want to make this worse." I asked who he was. He laughed and hung up. That was the first of many calls that would steal sleep from me. They came at odd hours, sometimes 3 in the morning, sometimes during lunch when I was trying to breathe through a flare of pain. Each time I picked up, there was nothing but a breathy silence, and then a click. A few times the line went dead before I could respond. I started screening calls and letting everything go to voicemail, but the messages were worse. Heavy breathing, clipped threats, and once a recording of a child giggling layered under static that made my skin crawl. Then the mail started. At first it was little things, an advertisement here, a returned postcard there, until one day my mailbox looked like a courtroom file. Official-looking letters arrived from faux government agencies claiming I was under review for suspicious pension activity. Another envelope warned that my benefits were frozen pending investigation into financial irregularities. The paper heads were all slightly off, different fonts, slightly wrong seals. Whoever sent them knew how to mimic authority convincingly. I took pictures and showed them to Trevor, who paled and refused to touch the envelopes. "She's trying to intimidate you," he said. "Melinda can make people do things." I filed a complaint with the local sheriff's department about the calls and the fake mail. The officer who took my statement was sympathetic but muted. There wasn't much he could do with anonymous calls and phony letters, he explained. "We'll log it," he said. "Keep everything. If it escalates, call us back." The helplessness in his voice was almost worse than the harassment itself. I slept with the light on for nights, jumping every time the phone buzzed. Friends suggested getting a new number. I didn't want to admit defeat by letting her chase me into hiding. Trevor started to act oddly cautious around me, glancing over his shoulder when we met and flinching at every car that passed slowly on the street. One night, over takeout at my kitchen table, he told me something that made my stomach drop. "Melinda's cousin works at the bank downtown," he said, stirring his rice without looking up. "I remember because she used to brag about how she could move things through the system when she needed to." I felt cold all over. "You knew about a cousin?" I asked. He shrugged. "She mentioned it in passing, like a silly brag. I didn't think much of it. That fit too neatly. Melinda had local connections, someone who could print paperwork, someone who could verify IDs, someone who could send letters that looked genuine." Suddenly, the whole thing stopped being just a personal betrayal and became a networked scheme. She hadn't acted alone. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how precisely she'd orchestrated everything. The fake texts, the convincing forgeries, the way the pension office had been visited in person. Someone on the inside had to have helped. The idea made me sick. On Trevor's insistence, we went through her laptop again. Hidden beneath holiday photos, I found scanned templates labeled with bank codes and what looked like internal transfer memos. There were spreadsheets with clients' names and notes. Confirm ID, call before transfer, use branch downtown. Whoever had set those files up knew banking processes intimately. I printed everything and sent encrypted copies to my lawyer. I had reached out to an attorney 2 days earlier after the first wave of harassment. She was blunt and efficient, exactly what I needed. "Don't engage with the callers," she said on the phone. "Document everything. We'll file an injunction to stop harassment and begin a fraud case. But you must expect pushback." Her voice was steady, but the words, "expect pushback," felt like a warning more than legal counsel. Within 48 hours of sending the files, the harassment ratcheted up. Someone scrawled an ugly message on my front door in marker Liar and egged my mailbox that night. I found a fake eviction notice taped to my stoop the next morning. A coworker from the clinic called to say a man had asked about me at the front desk, claiming to be from Social Security. The detective assigned to my case advised me to keep a low profile and not to post anything online. "They're trying to bait you," he said. "If you respond, it gives them leverage." I felt trapped between fighting back and protecting whatever remained of my life. Trevor started leaving notes under my door, hurried apologies and updates. I tried to talk to her. She's disappeared again. Be careful. One note, however, changed everything. He'd found a document in Melinda's purse, a certified bank form showing my account had been reassigned and a stamped receipt from the pension office, both dated before she left town. The signature was a close forgery, and the stamp looked legitimate. I sent a photo to my lawyer and waited. My lawyer's reply arrived late at night. We have grounds for a temporary restraining order and a criminal complaint, but I need you to be available. Don't go anywhere. I wasn't given a grace period to prepare. My name was already being pulled into a story I'd never asked to be part of. 2 days later, while I was making tea, there was a hard knock at my door. I opened it to find 2 uniformed officers on my porch, their faces unreadable. One of them spoke first and very quietly. Miss Stanton. We need to speak with you. We have a warrant. But calm wasn't an option when the police showed up at my door 2 days later with a warrant in my name. The officer's voice was stern when he said I was being questioned for unauthorized withdrawals. For a moment, I couldn't process the words. They stood there on my porch, serious but polite, as if this were routine business and not the unraveling of my life. My stomach dropped so fast it hurt. Unauthorized what? I managed to ask, clutching the doorframe for balance. Miss Stanton, the taller officer said, we have a warrant to search your residence and seize any financial records related to your pension account. He handed me a folded paper, his gloved hand steady. I skimmed the document, my heart pounding. The charges listed were surreal suspicion of financial fraud, identity falsification, and misappropriation of funds, all tied to my name. There's been a mistake, I said, my voice trembling. I'm the victim. Someone my sister-in-law stole from me. The shorter officer's tone softened slightly. Then you'll have a chance to explain that, ma'am. For now, we just need your cooperation. They entered my home carefully, one heading toward my study, the other toward my living room. I stood frozen as they began opening drawers and snapping photos of documents. The sight of them rifling through my things made me nauseous. It didn't matter that I was innocent. I looked guilty. And that was enough. I called my lawyer as soon as they allowed me to, my hands shaking so badly I could barely dial. She told me to stay calm and not to say anything beyond the facts. They must have falsified evidence, she said quickly. Don't panic, Callie, we'll fix this. But panic was all I had left. An hour later, I was sitting in the police station, a cup of untouched water in front of me, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. The detective assigned to the case introduced himself, Detective Harris, middle-aged, composed, and watchful. Miss Stanton, he began. We received a report from your pension institution indicating you authorized multiple transfers to external accounts. The paperwork matches your signature. The account numbers lead back to you. I stared at him, my mouth dry. No, that's impossible. My sister-in-law forged my documents. I've already filed a complaint about it. He nodded slowly, jotting notes. We have that complaint on record, but the timing is interesting. The complaint was filed 2 days after the transactions. From an external view, it could look like you're covering yourself. I felt my chest tighten. So, what, I'm supposed to believe you think I stole my own money? He didn't flinch. We're following procedure, Miss Stanton. These things take time. I wanted to scream, but my lawyer's earlier words echoed in my mind, stay calm. Instead, I sat there, every muscle rigid, while he asked about my relationship with Trevor and Melinda. I explained everything. The forged texts, the fake forms, the threats, even the mysterious phone calls. Harris listened carefully, occasionally glancing up with a look I couldn't read. Sympathy, maybe, or skepticism. Finally, he leaned back. Your story is consistent with some information we've been gathering. There's evidence suggesting your sister-in-law has done this sort of thing before. But we'll need corroboration. What kind of corroboration? I asked. Testimony, he said. If someone close to her, say, your brother-in-law, can confirm your version of events, it'll help. Relief flickered in my chest. Trevor will back me up. He knows everything. Good, Harris said, closing his folder. We'll contact him today. When they finally let me go home that evening, I felt hollow. My house, once my refuge, now felt violated and strange. Drawers were left open, folders scattered, the air heavy with the scent of latex gloves and cheap paper. A few hours later, my phone rang. It was Trevor. His voice was hoarse, trembling. "Callie, they called me," he said. "The detective. I told them everything. I swear I told them you didn't do any of this." "Thank you," I whispered, the tears coming before I could stop them. "Thank you for standing up for the truth." There was a pause on the other end. "Callie, I have to tell you something." My pulse quickened. "What?" "She's gone," he said, his voice breaking. "Melinda, I came home from work, and everything of hers is gone. Clothes, computer, jewelry, everything. She left a note." "What did it say?" He hesitated. "Just one sentence. You'll regret choosing her over me." The words hit me like ice water. I sank into my chair, gripping the phone tight. "Trevor, you need to tell the police, right now." "I already did," he said softly. "They're looking for her. But she's good at disappearing. She's done it before, back when she was younger. She used to run scams with her cousin. She told me once, as a joke, that she could make a person vanish from paper if she wanted to." A chill ran through me. Melinda hadn't just stolen my money, she'd tried to erase me, and now she was out there, somewhere, free and furious. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house sounded like footsteps. Every passing car like someone watching. I replayed the entire nightmare in my head, from the moment she'd offered to handle my pension to the second the police had shown up at my door. Every detail fit together into one horrifying truth. She hadn't acted impulsively. This was premeditated, planned, perfectly executed. My lawyer called early the next morning to confirm that the investigation had shifted focus. The pension office had verified a series of false IDs matching Melinda's description, and the fraud unit was now pursuing her. But even with that small victory, the damage was done. My reputation was tarnished, my trust in people obliterated. As I hung up the phone, a knock sounded at the door, 3 quick raps that made my heart leap. I froze, half expecting another officer. Or worse. But when I opened it, there was no one there, just an envelope resting on the doormat. Inside was a single photograph, me, sitting in my kitchen, taken from outside my window. He said the last thing she told him before she left was, "You'll regret choosing her over me." For a while, it felt like Melinda had vanished into thin air. After the photo appeared on my doorstep, I stopped sleeping. Every shadow felt like her. Every car that slowed down outside made my stomach twist. The police collected the photo, took fingerprints, and promised to follow up, but weeks passed with no word. Eventually, I learned to live in that state of half-alertness, jumping at sounds, checking locks twice, leaving the TV on for background noise because silence made me paranoid. Detective Harris told me that Melinda had officially been listed as a fugitive. They'd found her car abandoned outside a rest stop 2 towns over, with the plates removed and the VIN number filed off. Inside the glove compartment was a single receipt for a prepaid, a phone, and a bus ticket to a city 3 states away. The trail went cold after that. Trevor was a wreck. He called every day, sometimes drunk, sometimes crying, sometimes apologizing for things that weren't his fault. "I should have seen it sooner," he kept saying. "She used me, Callie. She used both of us." I wanted to comfort him, but every conversation just reopened wounds I was trying to close. It wasn't just that Melinda had stolen my money, it was that she'd stolen my sense of safety, my ability to trust, even my belief in my own instincts. I'd let her into every corner of my life, and she'd weaponized my vulnerability against me. Still, time moved on. Slowly, painfully. It did. Months passed, and the calls stopped. The letters stopped. Even the nightmares began to fade. I started therapy again, at my counselor's insistence, and began volunteering twice a week at the community health clinic downtown. Being around people who needed help gave me purpose again. For the first time in years, I began to feel like I was reclaiming pieces of myself that Melinda had tried to take. Trevor started rebuilding too. He moved into a small apartment and got a new job at a repair shop in another city. Every now and then, he'd check in, his voice steadier each time. We both wanted to believe the worst was over. Then, one Thursday afternoon, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Miss Stanton?" a man's voice said. "This is Detective Alvarez from the Financial Crimes Division in Oregon. We believe you might have information relevant to an active investigation." My pulse spiked instantly. "Oregon? I don't..." He cut me off gently. "It concerns a woman named Melissa Dane. Does that name mean anything to you?" For a second, I thought I misheard him. "Melissa?" I repeated. "She also goes by Melinda Stanton," he added. "We have reason to believe she's operating under a new identity. We'd like to speak with you in more detail." My heart stopped. "You found her?" "Yes," he said simply. "And it looks like she's been running a large-scale financial scam targeting widows and retirees. Dozens of victims. Same method, fake investment accounts, forged signatures, identity theft." I sat down hard on the couch, gripping the phone so tight my knuckles turned white. "She's doing it again," I whispered. The detective confirmed that they had photos, witness statements, and partial financial records connecting her to multiple fraudulent accounts. The woman calling herself Melissa Dane had been posing as a financial advisor, helping elderly clients secure their pensions in private trusts. She'd stolen over $500,000 across 3 states. And then, the detective said something that chilled me to my core. "Your name came up on one of the transfer lists. We believe she used your information as a false reference to gain credibility with new victims." I went silent. The idea that she was still using me, even now, made my skin crawl. "She's scheduled for a bail hearing next week," Alvarez continued. "If possible, we'd like you to attend and confirm her identity for the court." "I'll be there," I said immediately. When I hung up, I sat there for a long time, staring at nothing. It wasn't relief, I felt it was something colder, something closer to vengeance. I booked a flight that same evening. The night before I left, I found myself digging through the folder I'd kept from the beginning. The bank statements, the forgeries, the fake texts. Every piece of evidence I'd once thought was the end of my story now felt like a weapon waiting for its purpose. When I arrived at the courthouse, Melinda was already there. I spotted her instantly, even though her hair was darker and she wore glasses. She was thinner now, sharper around the edges, but her posture was the same, calm, confident, and defiant. When she saw me, her expression flickered just for a second, but that was enough. "Miss Dane," the bailiff called, but she didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on mine, cold and steady. There was no apology in them, no fear, only a faint, knowing smirk that made my stomach turn. After the hearing, Detective Alvarez thanked me for confirming her identity. "She's facing multiple charges now," he said. "This time, the evidence is overwhelming." I nodded, but I couldn't bring myself to feel satisfied. "You don't understand," I told him quietly. "She doesn't stop. Even when she's caught, she finds a way to twist things, to make people doubt what's real." He gave me a sympathetic look but didn't respond. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window, staring at the city lights, trying to make sense of how one woman could cause so much destruction. And then, my phone buzzed. It was a blocked number. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. There was a pause, then a low, familiar voice on the other end. "You should have left me alone, Callie." My blood ran cold. Then, one evening, I received a call from a detective out of state. They'd found Melinda, and what she was doing made my blood freeze. Melinda had been living under a fake name and running another scam. The detective's words replayed in my mind as I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly it hurt. Melissa Dane. The name felt fake in my mouth, like something pulled from a bad novel. But it was her. Of course it was her. Melinda had always been too clever to disappear completely. She was the kind of person who couldn't live without control. Detective Alvarez explained that she'd reinvented herself entirely. New hair color, new wardrobe, new accent even. She'd moved into a small coastal town in Oregon where nobody knew her past and opened a retirement consultancy. The perfect cover for a woman who'd already mastered financial manipulation. She had business cards, a website, and even a rented office in a sleek downtown building. It was all fake. Every client she signed up was another mark. The police had been tracking her for months under various aliases: Melissa Dane, Melina Darrow, L. Stanton, each used for a separate fraud operation. I wasn't her only victim. There were at least 15 confirmed cases, maybe more. Mostly widows or retirees, just like me, who trusted her because she knew exactly how to speak their language. She'd start with sympathy, spin a story about protecting your pension from inflation, then get them to sign authorization forms. Within weeks, their accounts were empty. The worst part? She wasn't even hiding well. She'd attended charity events, volunteered at community fundraisers, and made friends with local business owners. She was still the same charming manipulator, just wearing a new mask. When the detective asked me to testify, I didn't hesitate. I wanted to look her in the eyes again, not out of anger, but closure. I wanted her to see that I wasn't afraid anymore. The trial was set for mid-spring. By the time it began, the courtroom was packed: victims, reporters, investigators. It felt surreal seeing her there, dressed in beige, hair perfectly styled, acting like she belonged anywhere but a courtroom. When the bailiff called her name, Melissa Dane, also known as Melinda Stanton, she didn't even flinch. She simply lifted her chin and smiled faintly, as if daring the world to prove her wrong. When I took the stand, my hands shook, but my voice was steady. I told the court everything: how she'd offered to handle my pension, how she'd tricked Trevor and me, how she'd drained my savings, framed me, and disappeared. I described the late-night calls, the fake letters, the humiliation of being treated like a criminal. Every word felt like pulling glass from a wound, but I kept going. Her attorney tried to twist my story, suggesting that I had voluntarily allowed her access, that maybe I'd misunderstood our arrangement. But the evidence was too strong: bank records, forged signatures, testimony from Trevor, and identical fraud patterns across other victims. Each piece painted a picture of calculated deceit. At one point during cross-examination, the attorney asked, "Miss Stanton, is it fair to say you once trusted my client?" I looked directly at Melinda when I answered. "Yes," I said. "I trusted her with everything. And she used that trust to destroy me." For the first time, I saw a flicker of emotion on her face, something sharp, fleeting. Like irritation that I'd spoken the truth out loud. Several other victims shared their stories, some tearful, others furious. A retired teacher who'd lost her husband's pension. A war widow whose entire savings disappeared. A man in his 70s who'd signed investment forms she'd mailed him. Melinda had a pattern: target the lonely, the grieving, and the kind. Trevor's testimony was the breaking point. He looked pale and defeated as he described his role: how he'd unknowingly helped her forge documents, how she'd lied to him about everything, how she'd threatened him when he confronted her. "I was her husband," he said, voice cracking. "But she never saw me as a person, just another tool." By the time he stepped down, the courtroom was silent. The prosecution laid out the evidence in painful detail: multiple bank accounts in different states, all linked to Melinda, falsified IDs, rental agreements under fake names, and digital forgeries traced to her laptop. The scope of it was staggering. She hadn't just stolen from people, she'd built an entire empire out of deceit. When the judge called for recess, I caught her looking at me again. She didn't glare or sneer, she smiled. A small, knowing smile that chilled me more than any threat ever could. It was the smile of someone who believed she still had one last trick up her sleeve. And she did. A few days later, during a hearing to review evidence, Melinda's attorney filed a new motion, a claim that she wasn't the true mastermind at all. The documents suggested someone else had been behind the financial operations, using her as a front. It was absurd. But Melinda had always been good at absurd lies that sounded almost believable. The prosecutor looked furious. "Your Honor, this is a stall tactic," he said. "The defendant has a history of fabricating alternative narratives to avoid accountability." Melinda only sat back and crossed her legs, eyes gleaming. I should have known that smile meant something, that she had one more twist waiting, one more lie to weaponize. They asked me to testify against her once she was caught. Trevor agreed to cooperate as well, determined to make things right. When they finally arrested her, she screamed that we'd ruined her life. I watched from the courtroom as she faced the judge with no trace of remorse. It was surreal. This was the same woman who'd once promised to handle everything for me. But just when I thought justice would finally prevail, Melinda pulled one more shocking stunt. During her trial, Melinda claimed she wasn't the mastermind at all. I was. The moment her attorney uttered those words, the entire courtroom went silent. My stomach twisted so violently I thought I might faint. I had expected lies, manipulation, even tears, but not this. Not a complete reversal of reality. Melinda sat at the defense table, calm and collected, her hands folded neatly in front of her like a schoolteacher preparing a lecture. Her expression was almost serene. She was the one who orchestrated everything. Her attorney began. Miss Stanton used my client as a scapegoat. The so-called forged documents? They were prepared by Miss Stanton herself, who then blamed her sister-in-law when her scheme fell apart. My pulse roared in my ears. I wanted to scream, to shout that it was absurd, but I could only stare at her. She didn't look at me at first. She didn't need to. She knew exactly what her words were doing to me. Her lawyer continued, presenting a folder full of emails that supposedly proved her innocence. They were clearly fabricated dates that didn't line up, phrases I'd never used, details that made no sense, but they looked real. The messages painted a story where I had supposedly convinced Melinda to transfer my pension into a shared fund to hide money from the IRS. According to her, I had pressured her into signing the forms to spread the risk. The lies were so calculated they almost sounded plausible. Almost. My lawyer, Miss Hewitt, objected immediately. Your Honor, these so-called emails are obvious fabrications. The metadata will show they were created recently after Miss Stanton's arrest. The judge nodded. We'll allow a forensic review. But Melinda wasn't done. When she finally took the stand, she played her role flawlessly, her voice trembling just enough to sound vulnerable, her tone soft but steady. She told the jury that she'd tried to help me, that I'd become obsessed with losing control of my finances, that I'd begged her to move the money into her name to protect me from myself. Every word out of her mouth was poison coated in sugar. I thought I was helping her, she said, wiping away a single tear. She was family. She said I was the only one she trusted. I didn't realize she was setting me up until it was too late. The jury watched her closely. Some looked skeptical, but others were leaning in, listening. Melinda's charm was her most dangerous weapon. She could make people believe anything if she spoke long enough. Then she pulled out her final prop, a handwritten note that she claimed I'd given her, authorizing the pension transfer. The paper looked aged, crinkled, convincing. My signature, almost perfect, sat at the bottom. My stomach churned. I knew it was forged, but to the untrained eye, it looked authentic. My lawyer stood up, holding her ground. Your Honor, we'll present forensic handwriting analysis proving this note was fabricated. But I'd also like to remind the court that Miss Stanton has a documented history of forgery and fraud. The judge nodded again, but Melinda only smirked faintly. She knew exactly what she was doing, planting seeds of doubt. That was her specialty. Over the next few days, her defense team spun their web tighter. They questioned my credibility, suggesting I had a vendetta against her after Ethan's death. They painted me as a bitter widow, financially unstable, clinging to resentment. Each jab cut deeper than I wanted to admit. There were moments when I caught members of the jury glancing at me not with sympathy, but uncertainty. That uncertainty terrified me more than anything. Melinda didn't need to prove she was innocent. She just needed to make them wonder if maybe I wasn't. I remember sitting in the hallway during recess, my hands shaking, when Trevor found me. He looked exhausted but resolute. She's lying, he said immediately. I can prove it. He pulled out a small USB drive. I found this last night, in an old jewelry box she left behind at the house. It's got voice memos. She used to record herself, probably to brag about her plans. One of them has her talking about forging your signature. My breath caught. Are you sure? He nodded. I listened to it 3 times. It's her voice. She says your name. We handed the drive over to my lawyer that same hour. She had it verified by digital analysts, who confirmed the recordings were authentic. When the prosecution played them in court the next day, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Melinda's own voice filled the courtroom low, confident, almost smug. Callie will never know what hit her. I've got the paperwork, the fake text chain, the pension form. She'll look guilty before she even realizes what happened. The sound of my name on her tongue made me feel sick, but the impact was undeniable. Every juror's face changed at once: shock, disgust, betrayal. Melinda's composure cracked for the first time. Her hands twitched, and her jaw clenched as she realized the noose had tightened. Her attorney tried to recover, arguing that the recordings could have been doctored, but the judge wasn't buying it. By the time the prosecution finished replaying the files, it was over. The illusion she'd spent months weaving had unraveled in minutes. I watched her sink back in her chair, the mask slipping. Gone was the calm, collected woman who'd strutted into court like she owned it. In her place was something raw, cornered, furious, exposed. For the first time, I saw fear in her eyes. Real fear. And in that moment, I realized something. Melinda wasn't invincible. She'd fooled banks, police, and family, but the truth, once given a voice, had finally outsmarted her. For the first time, I saw Melinda lose control, and I knew her lies were finally collapsing. The courtroom was silent when the judge read the verdict, guilty on all counts. The words hung in the air like a held breath finally exhaled. I sat motionless, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it echo in my ears. For a moment, the silence was deafening. Then the gavel came down, and it was over. Months of hearings, testimony, and sleepless nights condensed into one final declaration. Melinda Stanton, guilty of fraud, identity theft, falsification of documents, and obstruction of justice. I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just stared at her. Melinda sat at the defense table, her face drained of color. For once, she wasn't performing. No tears. No speeches. Just a hard, cold stare fixed on the table in front of her. I expected her to lash out, to make one last snide comment, but she didn't. Maybe she finally realized she'd lost control. Maybe she was already calculating her next move. The judge sentenced her to 15 years in prison, with eligibility for parole after 10. He called her crimes an elaborate and deliberate act of manipulation, exploiting the trust of family and community. His tone was stern but weary, like a man who'd seen too many people like her in his courtroom. When the bailiff led her away, she turned her head slightly, just enough for her eyes to meet mine. It wasn't anger I saw there, it was contempt. The look of someone who still believed she was smarter than everyone else in the room. I held her gaze and didn't look away. For the first time, she was the one trapped behind barriers, and I was the one free. Afterward, the courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Reporters scribbled notes. Other victims hugged one another, and I felt Trevor's hand on my shoulder. When I turned, he looked like a man both relieved and destroyed. His voice cracked when he said, "It's over, Callie. She can't hurt you anymore." Outside, the air was sharp and cool, carrying the faint scent of rain. I stood on the courthouse steps, staring at the gray clouds rolling in. I should have felt victorious, but all I felt was hollow. I'd gotten justice, yes, but it hadn't given me back what I'd lost: my peace, my trust, my sense of safety. Still, there was a strange calm in the emptiness. Like standing in the aftermath of a storm, knowing the destruction was done but the air was finally still. Over the next few weeks, life began to move in slow, uncertain steps toward normal. The pension office reinstated my benefits, and with my lawyer's help, I received restitution from the court, partial reimbursement from Melinda's seized accounts. It wasn't the full amount she'd stolen, but it was enough to get me back on my feet. I used part of the settlement to pay off lingering debts and fix up the house. It was therapeutic, in a way, repainting walls that had once absorbed the weight of fear, repairing things that had quietly fallen apart while I was consumed by the case. Each stroke of paint, each nail hammered into wood, felt like reclaiming a piece of my life. Trevor visited often, helping with repairs and small projects. He carried guilt like a shadow, and though I told him over and over that it wasn't his fault, he couldn't forgive himself. I was supposed to protect you, he said one night as we sat on the porch, the sky streaked orange with sunset. Instead, I handed her everything she needed to ruin you. I shook my head. You were as much her victim as I was. She used both of us. The only thing that matters now is that we survived her. He nodded slowly, but I could tell he didn't fully believe it. Sometimes I caught him staring into the distance, lost in thought, as if replaying every red flag he'd ignored. I understood that look. I wore it myself for months. By the end of the summer, I finally felt like I could breathe again. My back pain had worsened over the years, but emotionally, I was stronger than I'd ever been. I began volunteering full-time at the clinic, helping other people navigate insurance claims and government paperwork, small ways to give back, to make something meaningful out of what I'd endured. Still, there were nights when I woke up thinking I heard the phone ringing, or imagined the faint echo of Melinda's voice in the back of my mind. Trauma doesn't just fade, it lingers, reshaping how you see the world. But I refused to let her live rent-free in my head any longer. When the official letter from the court arrived, confirming that restitution had been finalized, I sat at my kitchen table and read it twice. The document was crisp, precise, and final. I folded it neatly and placed it in the folder where everything began, the same folder that once held evidence of her lies. It felt symbolic, closing the same file that had opened my nightmare. The following week, I received a check from the pension office with a note attached. We appreciate your patience during this difficult process. Your account is now secure and fully reinstated. It should have been just another piece of paper, but holding it made me cry for the first time in months. Not out of grief this time, but release. Trevor called that evening to check in. How are you holding up? He asked gently. I smiled faintly. Better than I thought I'd be. It's strange, but it feels like I can finally exhale. I'm glad, he said. You deserve peace, Callie. We talked for a while about nothing, weather, old memories, plans for the future. It felt normal, something I hadn't felt in years. But when we hung up, I noticed an envelope on my doorstep. No return address, no stamp, just my name. Written in looping, familiar handwriting. Or so I thought until the letter arrived. A month after her sentencing, I received a handwritten letter from prison. It arrived on a dull Monday morning, tucked between utility bills and a grocery store flyer. The return address made my hands go cold, Havenbrook State Correctional Facility. For a long moment, I just stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the envelope like it might explode if I touched it. The handwriting on the front was neat and familiar, the same looping cursive that once wrote me cheerful notes for holidays and birthdays. Only now, it sent a chill down my spine. I almost threw it away. Part of me didn't want to give her the satisfaction of being heard again, but curiosity is a cruel thing. My fingers tore the envelope before my mind could stop them. The letter began simply, Dear Callie, I'm sure you're proud of yourself. You think this is over, but it isn't. I just wanted you to know that there's more to the money than you ever understood. You were right about me, I took what I could, but I wasn't the only one who did. I felt my stomach twist. I read on. You should ask yourself why Ethan's life insurance disappeared before you ever filed the paperwork, or why certain forms were never sent to you. Someone made sure of that. You thought I was cruel, but I was just smarter. I didn't create the game, I just played it better than you did. I froze. Ethan's life insurance. I hadn't thought about that policy in years. After his death, I'd been told it was minimal, barely enough to cover final expenses. I never questioned it because I was too shattered to care about money. But now she was suggesting something darker. There are things Trevor never told you, the letter continued. He signed things, he followed instructions. Maybe he didn't know everything, but he knew enough. Don't hate me for taking advantage of an opportunity you ignored. Hate the people who kept the truth from you. The rest of the page was filled with rambling sentences about betrayal, justice, and her twisted version of morality. She ended it with one final taunting line. You were never the victim, Callie. You were just the last to find out how deep the lies went. I sat at the table for a long time, the letter trembling in my hands. I didn't know if it was a last-ditch attempt to manipulate me or if there was a fragment of truth hidden in her venom. Melinda never said anything without purpose. Every word she chose was calculated. I thought about Ethan, about how quickly the insurance paperwork had been handled after his death, about how Melinda had been the one who helped me organize things in those first few foggy weeks of grief. Could she have? No. That was impossible. Or was it? I picked up the phone and called Trevor. His voice sounded wary when he answered. I got a letter from her, I said flatly. He sighed heavily. I figured she'd try something like that. What did she say? She mentioned Ethan's life insurance, I said slowly. She said it disappeared before I ever saw of it. There was a pause, then another. Trevor? He cleared his throat. She's lying, Callie. Don't let her pull you back into her games. His tone was off too fast, too defensive. I knew him well enough to hear the guilt under his words. Trevor, I said, softer now. Did you sign anything after Ethan died? Anything Melinda asked you to? He hesitated again. She told me it was just for closing out accounts. Said it would make things easier for you. My breath caught. What kind of accounts? I don't know, he said, voice cracking. I swear I didn't know she was up to anything. The silence between us stretched. Finally I said, I believe you didn't know, Trevor. But I think she's telling the truth about one thing. There's something else we missed. I hung up and stared at the letter again, my mind racing. If she was right, if Ethan's policy had been tampered with, then someone had altered the beneficiary long before his death. That would mean Melinda had been planning her theft not just months in advance, but years. My lawyer advised me to ignore the letter. She's manipulating you, Callie, she warned. It's what she does. Don't give her another inch of your life. I wanted to agree. But the seed of doubt had already been planted, and I couldn't unsee it. I lay awake that night thinking about the paperwork Melinda had handled for me after Ethan's funeral, the envelopes she took to the post office, the forms she promised to double-check. The next morning, I went digging through the old file cabinet in my study. Buried beneath tax returns and medical records was a faded manila folder labeled E. Stanton Insurance. My heart pounded as I pulled it out. Inside were forms and statements I hadn't touched in nearly 5 years. Most of them looked ordinary, except for one, an authorization page bearing a signature that wasn't mine. The beneficiary field lists Family Trust Administrator, M. Stanton. I felt the blood drain from my face. Melinda hadn't lied, at least, not entirely. She'd been stealing from me long before my pension, before I even realized how deep her reach went. I sat there surrounded by evidence of betrayal that predated everything I thought I knew. It was almost poetic. Melinda's final cruelty was telling the truth, just enough of it to hurt me. When I called Trevor back that night, his voice shook. You found something, didn't you? He asked quietly. Yes, I whispered. And it changes everything. She claimed there was more to the money than I knew. Something connected to Ethan's old life insurance. My mind spun. I hadn't thought about Ethan's policy in years. She hinted that Ethan's policy had been tampered with by someone else in the family. I couldn't tell if she was trying to manipulate me again or expose something real. Trevor swore he knew nothing about it, but his hesitation said otherwise. That's when I decided I needed to uncover the truth about Ethan's money once and for all. I started digging through Ethan's old financial records. The next morning, the decision felt like instinct. I made a pot of coffee, rolled up my sleeves, and laid every file I could find across the dining room table. There were bank statements, medical bills, tax returns, years of paperwork that suddenly felt like evidence waiting to be uncovered. I told myself I wasn't chasing ghosts, just answers. But deep down, I already knew Melinda had left me one last mess to clean up. The first few hours were uneventful pages of mundane transactions, the kind every married couple accumulates over time. Then, buried between 2 folders, I found a sealed envelope labeled Policy Adjustment Stanton Family Trust. I'd never seen it before. My stomach dropped. The date in the corner was almost a year before Ethan's death. I slid the paper out carefully. The letterhead belonged to Horizon Life, the company that had handled Ethan's life insurance. The form confirmed a beneficiary change from Callie Stanton to the Stanton Family Trust, authorized by both Ethan and a secondary signatory, M. Stanton, Melinda. I stared at it for a long time, unable to breathe. The page blurred through my tears. I remembered the weeks after Ethan's heart attack, how she'd taken charge of everything, saying I was too fragile to deal with paperwork. I'd let her handle the insurance forms because I couldn't bear to read his name on anything without crying. I never questioned it. And she'd use that grief to steal from me. I looked closer. The signature next to Ethan's name didn't quite match. It was similar, but the pressure was off, the angle wrong. It wasn't his handwriting. I knew because I'd seen Ethan sign birthday cards, mortgage checks, even love notes. This was a forgery, a skilled one, but a forgery nonetheless. I called Horizon Life immediately. The representative was polite but cautious when I explained what I'd found. That policy's been closed for several years, she said. The payout was issued to the trust beneficiary on file. Do you have a record of the payout recipient? I asked, my voice shaking. Yes, ma'am. The disbursement was made to a trust account managed by a Melinda Stanton. Is that the name you're referring to? My heart sank. Yes, I whispered. That's her. The representative paused, clearly uncomfortable. I'm very sorry. The transaction was processed in accordance with the documents provided. If you believe there was fraud involved, you'll need to file a retroactive investigation request. But, after 5 years, recovery may be limited. Limited. The word rang in my ears like an insult. After I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. The truth had finally surfaced. Melinda's greed had begun long before the pension theft. She hadn't just stolen from me as a widow, she'd robbed me while Ethan was still alive. And the worst part was realizing she'd probably done it right under his nose, using his name, his trust, his love for his family. When I called Trevor that evening, his voice was small and broken. I know, he said before I could speak. I found my signature on one of those forms too. She told me it was just for tax adjustments, that we were helping you avoid higher estate fees if something happened to Ethan. My stomach twisted. You signed it? I didn't read it, he admitted. I just trusted her. God, I'm such an idiot. Don't, I said, cutting him off gently. That's exactly what she wanted, for both of us to blame ourselves while she cashed in. We spent hours going through what we knew, piecing together her steps. She'd convinced Trevor to co-sign the fake trust documents to make it appear legitimate. She'd filed the change with Horizon Life using Ethan's falsified signature. Then, when Ethan died, she'd quietly claimed the payout before I even realized what had happened. The pension scam had only been her encore. By midnight, I had a thick folder of evidence, photocopies, statements, forged documents, everything. I called my lawyer first thing in the morning and explained what I'd discovered. She listened quietly, then said, Callie, this changes everything. We can open a new case. It might take time, but this isn't over yet. For the first time in a long time, I felt a spark of something I hadn't felt since before Ethan's death resolve. While the legal wheels began turning, I took the next step myself. I sent every document, every shred of proof, to Detective Harris, who had handled Melinda's fraud case. His reply came 2 days later. We're reopening the file. This establishes premeditation. You did the right thing. That night, as I sat alone at my kitchen table surrounded by evidence of Melinda's years of deceit, I felt the strangest mix of grief and relief. Grief for Ethan, for the betrayal that had tainted even his memory. Relief that the truth, at last, had clawed its way into the light. In my mind, I pictured Melinda behind bars reading my discovery in the news. I imagined her smirk faltering, her eyes narrowing when she realized her perfect plan had finally been exposed down to the last detail. She had built her entire existence on deception, and now every brick of it was crumbling. Still, a part of me wished she'd just told the truth back when she was caught. Maybe it would have spared us both years of pain. But Melinda never confessed, she calculated. And even in defeat, she'd wanted to win. I gathered the papers into a new folder labeled Ethan Case Reopened. My hands stopped shaking for the first time in weeks. I looked at his old photo on the mantel, him smiling in that easy, unguarded way, and whispered, I'm sorry it took me this long, Ethan. But I'm going to make it right. I didn't care how long it took. I didn't care if she wrote another 100 letters. She had taken everything that mattered to me, but now, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of her. Because after everything Melinda took from me, I was finally taking back control. A year later, the final chapter of my story closed with true justice. Time has a strange way of healing and haunting at the same time. A year after uncovering the forged insurance records, the investigation into Melinda's earlier crimes finally came to a close. I remember standing outside the courthouse again, same steps, same gray walls, same chill in the air, but this time, I wasn't trembling. I wasn't the frightened widow anymore. I was the woman who'd survived her. The case against Melinda had grown larger than anyone imagined. The investigators confirmed that she'd started siphoning money long before Ethan died, small amounts from the life insurance and other assets, moving them through shell accounts under fake business names. She'd planned everything with the precision of a professional con artist. According to the court's findings, she'd embezzled over $300,000 before she even touched my pension. Her cousin, the bank employee Trevor once mentioned, turned out to be part of the scheme too. He cooperated with authorities in exchange for a lighter sentence. The web of deceit they'd built stretched back years, touching dozens of transactions and identities. But in the end, every trail led back to her. When the final hearing concluded, the judge extended her sentence to 22 years, citing prolonged premeditated fraud and emotional exploitation. Melinda showed no emotion as the verdict was read. No tears, no denial, just that same blank mask she'd worn when everything fell apart. Maybe, at last, even she'd run out of lies. Trevor was officially cleared of all legal responsibility. The court acknowledged that he had been manipulated into signing documents under false pretenses. I watched him cry when the judge read that part aloud. His relief was palpable, but his guilt lingered like smoke. Afterward, he hugged me on the courthouse steps. "It's finally over," he said, voice cracking. I nodded, but deep down I knew something fundamental had changed in both of us. You don't walk through that kind of storm and come out the same. You just learn how to live in the aftermath. The state helped me recover a portion of the stolen life insurance funds through restitution. It wasn't the full amount, but it was more than I dared hope for. My lawyer suggested investing part of it to rebuild long-term security. But I had another idea. I used a portion of the money to start a non-profit organization called Reclaim, dedicated to helping victims of financial abuse, particularly widows and older adults who had been scammed or manipulated by trusted family members. It started small, just a few volunteers abreast, hotline, and a modest office above a bakery downtown. But word spread quickly. People began calling, writing, showing up at the door with stories heartbreakingly similar to mine. Every time I sat across from someone telling their story, I saw fragments of myself, the disbelief, the guilt, the raw ache of betrayal. Helping them helped me heal. Through Reclaim, I began speaking publicly at community centers and retirement seminars, teaching people how to protect their finances and recognize red flags. Standing on those stages, telling my story out loud, turned the pain into purpose. The same voice Melinda once silenced now helped others find theirs. Trevor sometimes attended those talks quietly, sitting in the back row. Afterward, he'd help stack chairs or hand out brochures. I think it was his way of seeking redemption, though I never told him he needed to. The truth was, we both found something redemptive in rebuilding not money but meaning. Life moved forward. Slowly, gently. The nightmares faded, replaced by quieter dreams of peace. I started gardening again, rediscovering the simple rhythm of nurturing something from the ground up. The clinic where I volunteered expanded its outreach, and I took a part-time role helping coordinate financial counseling for patients dealing with long-term injuries like mine. One afternoon, as I was leaving the office, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. My stomach tightened instinctively, but when I answered, it was a reporter from a local newspaper. "Miss Stanton," she said. "I'm writing an article about financial recovery programs for widows. I'd love to feature your story, it's incredibly inspiring." For a moment, I didn't know what to say. I'd spent so long trying to erase the humiliation Melinda had caused me, and now someone wanted to tell the world about it. But then I realized it wasn't a story of humiliation anymore. It was one of survival. A month later, the article was published under the belated act of Betrayal, headlined "From Victim to Voice, Widow Turns Fraud into Fight for Justice." The response was overwhelming. Letters and donations poured in from strangers thanking me for giving them courage to confront their own abusers. Reading their words, I finally understood something I hadn't before. What Melinda had stolen from me wasn't just money, it was identity. And reclaiming that was the truest justice of all. A year after her second sentencing, I received one final piece of mail from the correctional facility. I didn't open it. I didn't need to. Whatever she had to say no longer mattered. I tossed it into the fireplace and watched the flames consume it until only ashes remained. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment, it's about freedom. And as I watched that envelope burn, I felt free. I still visit Ethan's grave once a month. I bring fresh daisies, his favorite, and tell him about the people Reclaim has helped. About Trevor finding peace. About how the world keeps moving forward. I tell him I miss him, but I'm finally okay. And for the first time, I mean it. When I leave, I always glance back at the headstone, reading the inscription he'd chosen years before we ever imagined tragedy. The truth always finds the light. He was right. It took years, heartbreak, and the destruction of everything I thought I knew, but the truth did find the light. Melinda remains behind bars, where she can no longer twist anyone's trust into currency. And as for me, I've learned that survival isn't just about living through something, it's about living beyond it. Because some stories deserve an ending, and this time, it was mine to write.